Stan really needs no introduction, but he is a world-renowned bodybuilder, powerlifter, entrepreneur, and nutrition expert. He's known as the world's strongest bodybuilder. He holds world records in powerlifting and has competed at the highest levels of bodybuilding, earning his IFBB Pro card. Stan's the creator of the Vertical Diet, which a lot of you have heard of. It's a performance-based nutrition system designed to optimize health, strength, and recovery. He's worked with some elite athletes such as John Jones, Hafthor Bjornsson, Larry Wheels, and many others. And I consider Stan a great friend and mentor. We first met about 7 or 8 years ago. I was playing lacrosse at BYU in Utah, and I came down to Las Vegas, and he helped me with my squat form and a lot of the other compound lifts that I was looking to improve on. So Stan, really appreciate you taking the time and joining the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Talofa to our audience. That's hello from American Samoa, my current place of residence. My wife was born and raised here, and we lived in Seattle for 15 years and Vegas for 13 years. And finally, after visiting many times over the years, of course, now we have a 10 and 12-year-old. We came down here last Christmas and just fell in love with the place all over again and decided to sell our home and move here. So here we are. We're going to get the kids through high school here at the very least. But it's a little tropical island out in the South Pacific Ocean. Some people might be familiar with Fiji in order to locate it. We're not too far from there, about 5 hours off the coast of Australia or New Zealand. And it's a tiny little island. If it were a rectangle, it'd be 4 miles by 20 miles. It's about this, I think, smaller than or about the same size as Martha's Vineyard up there in New York. But only 40,000 people on the island, and it's just a beautiful volcanic tropical island with huge, lush green everywhere. You get plenty of rain and plenty of sun. And I drive around in my golf cart. It's 25-mile-an-hour speed limit on the island. And we go swimming and out in the ocean, and I play a little pickleball here of all things, and get my workouts in and play some golf and run the kids around. It's been a really hard life.
Sounds like it. Stan, walk me through that process a little bit, because I feel like there is sort of a movement happening in the world right now. A lot of people are traveling more often and also relocating to other beautiful parts of the world like American Samoa. Walk me through your decision-making process on that. What kind of caused you to want to check out American Samoa, eventually move there, and tell me a little bit more about that decision-making process.
Yeah, well, I'm 57 now, and I've been all over the world. I've been in 20 countries in all 50 states, conducted over 200 seminars, and I used to spend almost every weekend on an airplane flying somewhere. And so I've kind of been everywhere. My dad told me a long time ago, before I ever traveled the world, he said, the more places you go, the more they start to look the same. And I kind of started to feel that way after a while. And we had a really good life in Vegas. We enjoyed it. We were there for almost 13 years. But my wife was born and raised here. She has a lot of family here, 11 brothers and sisters, and all of their kids now, the nephews and nieces. And we have our little 10 and 12-year-old. And, more than anything, I think that it was because it's a great community to raise kids. You've got all those generations of families here, the great-grandparents, the grandparents, the moms and dads and the kids and all the cousins. You'll see 4 generations of families here. They start young, usually in their late teens, 19, 20, and they over the course of 20 years, they usually have a large family, 6, 7, 9 kids. So it's a huge community, and they say it takes a village to raise a family. And here you really have a village where my kids will look back on it and recall that it's a small island, and we see and hear everything because we have all these eyes and ears around us. It's a largely religious community. 97% of the community attends church every Sunday. And so there's just a really good foundation for the kids. It's probably primarily the biggest reason. In Vegas, we were a little nervous. We didn't want to let kids out of our sight. We didn't let them roam very far, and most certainly we were concerned of the influences around them. They start to get at that age, and down here, of course, a lot of the influence here is positive, and everybody sees everybody and helps everybody. So it's a safe community, and that probably more than anything. And plus, it's a little more. It's a little less hurried. We call it island time. as you may have heard.
Hmm.
People who live on the island don't really have a schedule and might not necessarily know what day it is or what time it is. And so these things kind of happen at their own pace. And, we're not rushing around all the time. It's just a lot more peaceful, calm environment, because I tend to be, and always have been, as most competitive athletes are, pretty type A and pretty high strung most of the time. And this has been a really good opportunity for me to relax a little. Most of my business is online. I have been doing some seminars in Brisbane. I have one in Canada later this month, and one in Cincinnati, and so I will be flying around a little bit, but not nearly as often. And most of the people I communicate with and work with, all the athletes that you mentioned, I correspond with them online. Hafthor and Mitchell Hooper both competed in the Arnold Classic. Mitchell won, Hafthor took third. And of course, I worked with both of them and still work with both of them. Lane Johnson from Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl recently. He's a Vertical Diet client as well. So I communicate with a lot of folks. And, I do train. People know me for having trained a lot of famous athletes, but the vast majority of people I work with are just dad bods and soccer moms. I help them lose weight, and I help them age gracefully, I guess you should say, because I've been through it all. I pushed my body pretty hard, and I've had to emerge out the other side with an eye on longevity. So I try and share that with people. I've been talking about blood testing and health for the better part of 15 years that you and most others have since you've seen me. Yep. So that's kind of how it all happened. I had the time and the resources. I wasn't tied to anything, and we just had a huge opportunity here.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned a few things that I wanted to circle back on, one being family. It sounds like family has played a huge role in your life recently, especially since having children, I'm sure. How has being a father changed the way that you approach life?
Great question. There's a few things that are key. One, I'm more risk averse. I grew up and throughout my life have been a bit of an entrepreneur, along as with a professional competitive athlete. A lot of sacrifices are made. Those are very selfish pursuits. I spoke about that in my video, Stress for Success, about what it took to build my businesses and run them, and how much that takes away, what a toll that takes. And I talked about in my video called Why I'm a Hypocrite, about my journey to become a pro bodybuilder and what that entailed. And I didn't have a wife or kids or a mortgage, for that matter, at the time. I had already built some successful businesses, so I had the time and the resources to be able to fully dump myself into that. But I think the biggest thing about becoming a dad is that it wakes you up that you're not the most important person in the world anymore. That was a huge turning point for me. It was right at that point. I started late. I was about 45 years old. And that's right at that point where I decided that I should stop pushing the envelope in terms of my powerlifting competition, because, you bulk up to 300 pounds or thereabouts to compete in powerlifting. It's not a healthy pursuit. I've always said, if you want to be healthy, don't compete. And health and fitness are two very different things. Health being free from illness or injury. Show me somebody who's never been injured, I'll show you somebody who's never won anything. And fitness being the ability to perform a particular duty or task, and the fitness level required to be a professional athlete, a UFC champion like John Jones, an NFL Super Bowl champion like Lane Johnson, or a world record powerlifter, or a strongman, Hafthor and Mitchell Hooper, even a 14-year-old gymnast in the Olympics, or a 10-year-old badminton player in China blowing out collateral lateral ligaments. Fitness is a very different pursuit, and it puts you in a position to where you're going to push the envelope as to what your body's capable of. And I've always said that a lot of what I do for my athletes is mitigate damage, because those aren't necessarily healthy pursuits. And then try and give them some longevity in their career, so that they don't have as much exposure to some of the damage that they're going to be doing. So those are the big things.
Beautiful. You mentioned competition, and you also mentioned, living a holistic and healthy lifestyle. As someone who was a former collegiate athlete, I really miss that competitive drive, that competitive edge in my life. And, I channel that in different aspects of my life. And also on a recent podcast, you mentioned John Jones. You mentioned his competitive drive and his competitive edge, and sort of compared it to like a Michael Jordan, always wanting to win and be the best. And I think a lot of us can resonate with that, those of us that have competed in the past. But how would you sort of batch or hold in your mind those two ideas or those two thoughts of being competitive, but then also having that holistic aspect to life and being balanced? Like, can both of those ideas be in our mind at the same time? And how have you mitigated that over the years?
You have to. Wasn't it Jordan Peterson that said, "Be a beast, but learn how to control it"? I thought it's an incredible piece of advice. You have to have balance in order to be a successful athlete. You can be competitive, but to be successful, you need to be able to be disciplined outside of competition. And we see, we mentioned a lot of names who we've seen in the news for having gotten out of control from time to time over the years. And especially with such a microscope on you all the time in the public forum, those kinds of things, while quite common, when they happen to somebody who's well known, they just become people focus on those things. You have to be disciplined beyond just being responsible. All the things that I spoke about in terms of being successful, your time management, your discipline, consistency. One of the big things is being able to recognize that you have limited physical capital, and you want to invest that wisely so as not to accumulate too much fatigue, repetitive strain, injury, exposure. Those are a lot of things that I do. When I mentioned when I mitigate damage, I try and design programs for athletes that minimize their exposure to injury and those kinds of things, and try and set them up to be successful long term. I learned a lot of this from the Russian athletes, to be honest. Mikhail Koklaev is somebody who I always admired in the strength industry as a power lifter and a strongman and an Olympic lifter as well. He talked about setting up 5-year plans rather than focusing on the next meet or the next competition, which is in 3 or 4 months. He sets up 5-year plans and progresses his training based on that window rather than trying to go balls to the wall all the time. Very disciplined that way. And he had a long career and was hugely successful in all of those arenas, all of which would crumble, a normal man, powerlifting, strongman, and Olympic weightlifting. And he did all three at a very high level and very successfully. So wow. I think it's very important to, they say that which gets measured gets improved. I think it's important to have a plan and to stick to it. And that was one of the things that I think always benefited me, even as a young man, because I was ADHD. Yeah. I used to have tics and repetitive behaviors, and I would get distracted very easily. But bodybuilding in particular, when I got to college, gave me a really consistent schedule, and it was something that gave me immediate feedback. Every time I went to the gym, I was able to determine whether I outperformed my previous performance at the gym, which was generally only 3 days prior, if you're talking about a particular body part. And that's what bodybuilding in particular is built around, or any sport should be built around, being measurable and progressible. And you should be able to have some metrics, whether it's speed or vertical jump. And I know that skill sports are a little harder to measure, but the foundation of that should be something in terms of strength and speed and agility that you couldn't possibly measure. And I record all those things. I would record all my meals. I would record all my training sessions, and I would have those scheduled at a particular time. And all of that, even in academics, that helps as well, to schedule your study sessions and to have a system by which you're able to progress in school. So that always works well for me. I write everything down. I have I always talk about my little spreadsheet that I print out on Excel that has a list of everything I need to do that day, whether it's my workout or my vitamin D or how many hours of sleep or pictures of my meals. And I require all of my clients to send me that information every day. even my famous clients. I want to see a picture of every meal. I want to know what you weigh in the morning and how many hours of sleep you got. That's a minimum. That's at a minimum. And it's also the big rocks that probably cover 97% of everything they need to be successful. And it's less for my information than it is for them to be held accountable and to use that as some way to continue to progress. It's right there in front of you. Did I do it or did I not? And so I would write little check marks. Even my 10-minute walks, I would have little dashes for each of my 4 10-minute walks a day. And I would do the same. My clients now, they use little step counters.
Step counters, yeah.
Yep. And that's for weight loss in particular. I want to know how many steps you got that day. All of those things are important, and I ask them for on a daily basis, because if I try and do a weekly check-in, generally they're off the rails and then they ghost me.
Yeah.
So I get it every day.
Yeah, as you say, science is the compliance is the science, right?
100%.
So yeah.
And how do you get to compliance? You have to have something to hold you accountable. And that's kind of where I step in. I say it's 1% information and 99% execution.
No, yeah.
And we know what to do, but are we doing it? I said something to the like of that in one of my videos. Nothing I say is groundbreaking, but are you doing it?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think my clients count on me for, is just tell them exactly what to do, and then just basically hold their hand. And every single day, if I don't get the information that I need from them, I'm texting them, hey, where's your body weight? How many hours of sleep did you get last night? Where's your picture of your meals?
Yeah.
And when you get it down to that, and it only takes, seconds, literally less than a minute a day to provide me all that information.
Yeah.
But having that and then holding yourself accountable to that over the long term, that's what I think most people need. I see kids that get out of the military and they flounder because they don't have somebody telling them what to do.
Yep.
Kids, the kids that go to college from high school, they flounder because in college nobody tells you have to go to class. The grades just show up 3 months later, and unfortunately, it's too late. So there's a lot of people who lack some of that consistency and self-discipline, and need someone, whether it's a spouse or a training partner or a coach, to help just keep them on track to consistently do what to get them focused on achieving their goals.
100%. And Stan, what you're saying reminds me a lot of Seth Godin. He mentions that if information were the most important thing, we would all be billionaires and have a six-pack. Right. So it's not just the information out there, but I believe it's inspiration. I believe it's being inspired by other people or by information. But there's an element of inspiration that I think causes people to take action and to change. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Inspiration, motivation, whatever word you want to put on it. Yeah. People can get motivated for a lot of reasons, for someone, in spite of someone. There's a whole host of reasons. But there's some days, most days, do you wake up and you're not motivated?
Yeah.
And that's when you just got to show up.
Yeah.
And you got to have some sort of schedule in place and somebody to be like, no, you're going to come in. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you have to go to the gym and set a PR every time. If I'm going to be specific to weightlifting, which is certainly my corner of the world. But you got to show up.
Yeah.
And invest at least the effort that you have available that day. I've often said that your performance in the gym is limited by a whole host of things. We talked about limited physical capital. Whether you've been overtraining or you're undersleeping or your diet's not on point or your nutrition, you got some stress going on. All of those things is going to affect your performance in the gym. So you don't necessarily have to go there and set a PR. You might not be capable of that day.
Right.
But you should show up just as a matter of consistency and give what you got. Don't overreach. We're learning a lot about that now. Learning a lot about the it's unnecessary to go to failure and might even be counterproductive. And it's hard for me to say, because I grew up in that era, all through the 90s and thereabouts, where it was just, the grind. It was all about how, I'll outwork anyone. And if you weren't just limping out of the gym and, laying around in pain all the time, that you didn't work hard enough. And now we know that the system is smarter than that. And it's interesting. I think the quote that's going around now, and I first heard it from Jordan Fagenbaum at Barbell Medicine: you don't add weight to get stronger. You get stronger so you can add weight. The
Wow.
adaptation occurs prior to your ability to progress. And all you're doing in there is just continuing to provide the stimulus. And when the body adapts and you're able to grab that extra rep or that 5 extra pounds, it's because you're already adapted from previous training.
Right.
And you don't have to overreach, because if you lift a heavier weight slower, you did not get stronger. And so that's, I know this seems somewhat philosophical to folks who aren't in the industry, but we're learning a lot about what really drives hypertrophy and strength. And we know now that it's not an excess of fatigue. It's not necessary.
Yeah.
And it's not, you don't damage muscle tissue and repair it. We used to think that micro tears. We used to think that, metabolic stress or the pump, you're going to do as many sets as you can, as fast as you can, and you get all pumped up. And we used to think that doesn't drive. Those are passengers, and probably too much of that will actually inhibit progress. It's just a huge component of all of this is psychological. Your ability to perform in the gym comes down to your central nervous system and your brain's ability to recruit the amount of effort to invest in that particular set. The switch is here. And we think it's physical, but the switch is here. Same thing's true with pain rehabilitation. I don't want to go down a whole nother pathway here, but the biopsychosocial method of pain rehabilitation now is widely accepted. There's a huge psychological component to pain, whereby your brain defends your body from risk, and it can overreact. The same way, say that if you had an allergy and you have a histamine reaction, your body's overreacting, and you need antihistamines to calm it down. Or with pain, you need some sort of low pain movement to calm down the signal, tell your body, hey, it's okay. It's okay. And certainly there's a continuum of that, from actual injury to I felt something when I was lifting, and then what a big part the psychology of that is for recovery. So sorry to bounce around so many topics, but these things are so important.
No, they're very relevant to today. I appreciate it. And so it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stan, but it sounds like the culture and the philosophy and the idea of weightlifting and muscle growth has changed a lot since you started in 1988 to where now it sounds like there's a lot more focus on the recovery process, and the adaptation actually comes from, of course, the stimulus of lifting weights and hypertrophy, but then the recovery process of resting and doing nothing. Is that really where a lot more of the focus is on these days?
Well, we've even evolved beyond that. Recovery is huge. There's no question. Load management is upstream of that. That's where we've been going wrong for all these years. That's where failure did us wrong. That's where we tried to train too hard, too often, and accumulated too much fatigue, and then you expose yourself to either injury, or you just don't actually repair. The recovery process doesn't repair all the damage that you did, so you're only ever just recovering from the damage you made, and you're not super compensating.
Okay.
You want to recover from the damage, and then your body adapts by getting stronger, so that it can handle that in the future and then some. That's the progression. And so really load management is probably the most important thing right now, both in terms of training adaptations for results for progressive overload, and in terms of injury prevention and rehabilitation. Load management is the key. I was down at a seminar some months ago, and one of the military trainers, actually 3 of them, came in together, and they work with Army, Navy, Marines, and they said, Stan, we've got a lot of injuries, and this is well known, that in the military you get lots of injuries, back, ankle, knee, because they put in a lot of miles. And I said, well, the problem is load management. You bring 100 guys in, and you make them all do the same thing. Day one, we're going to go do a 13-mile ruck with a 50-pound bag. Well, heck, 3/4 of those guys can't handle that.
Yeah.
And they're going to start getting into a deficit from day one. They're going to accumulate damage they can't recover from, and then day 2, day 3, day 4, and eventually they're, getting rehab. I said, can't you measure their current level of fitness? And this is important for those boys, and it's important for everyone at home. You don't want to go so far beyond your current level of fitness that you're going to expose yourself to injury, whether total load or repetitive strain in terms of volume. And that's the problem that happens. And they all looked at me like I was crazy. They shook their head. I said, can't you assign them a training workload progression based on their current level of fitness? And they're like, oh no, we can't do that. This is the military, because if someone sees someone else doing less, that's the problem. That's the problem.
It's the perception that they would have.
Yeah, and the goal is at the end of 3 months, at the end of basic training, you want them to achieve a particular level.
Right.
The beginners or the undertrained people will progress much faster than the people who are experienced. They'll have very gradual, small, incremental gains. We know that, from newbies versus experienced lifters, that you're just not going to see newbie gains as an experienced lifter. You're going to continue to slowly and gradually, just chip away over time to where it almost feels like it's, slowed to a halt.
Yeah.
But these guys down here are going to make these extraordinary progress if you don't take them from here to here on day one and break them first. And they said that does not exist in the military.
Yeah. That type of personalization. I think that it'd be hard to do with the amount of people that are in the military, or maybe that's something you can pitch to the military, and maybe you can start training.
That was my point. When I pitched it to these trainers, they looked at me and they're like, oh no. The psychology of that, you just can't have, guys thinking someone else is not doing as much as them. This is all about teamwork, working together. It's not. And I mean, the goal would be to have the strongest team at the time that, that you were required to step up and perform.
Right.
But instead, they'll just burn out the guys who can't hang.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because with proper training, the vast majority of those guys could get there. Yeah. But they break them too soon. Yeah. I think 50% of them end up with back injuries, and I mean the numbers are outrageous. Definitely. The number of injuries.
Yeah, my brother's actually. Oh, sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was saying my brother's in the Navy, and he tells me all kinds of stories about people getting injured. It can be detrimental, to start that quickly and to get the weight bumped up that quickly. It can really cause a lot of injury and be detrimental, not just to the physical body, but to someone's confidence, their mental landscape. There are a lot of things that can go wrong once injury occurs. Yeah. I don't know if you remember, I'm a University of Oregon grad. And I remember. Years down there. I was training a lot of the UVO football players and track athletes. So it's always been near and dear to my heart. It wasn't too many years ago, I think, that a new strength coach came in. Coach Radcliffe had been there for 25 years, and they did the hurry up offense. And so his team was always very well conditioned, but the defense was a little undersized. And so they would run up against those big powerhouses and kind of just get driven back. Yep. And so they brought in these Samoan kids from Southern California. The Samoan boys here on the island are just monsters. They're the number one per capita representation of football players in NCAA and NFL. They just come out that way. They're just bigger people, bigger feet, bigger hands, bigger heads, bigger bones. And they're super strong. And they don't even have a coordinated training program here on the island. And these kids, they're just so unbelievably powerful. Big boys. So they recruited a bunch of these boys from the Southern California schools and brought them up to the University of Oregon. And unfortunately, the coach overran them, and 3 of them went to the hospital with rhabdo. Just another example of how if you're just patient, you got to be careful. There's only so much. Remember, again, limited physical capital, and that physical capital can expand and shrink based on what you said. All those things outside the gym: the sleep, the nutrition, the hydration, the stress management.
and you want to be able to manage all of that and grow that responsibly. And that's so right now, the huge focus in the industry is getting away from forcing adaptations and being respectful of load management and stimulus. That's what we're focused on now.
Yeah, so we've evolved even further from just focusing on recovery. Now it's about load management. So from other aspects of life, do you think that this idea of focusing on load management for someone that is maybe a parent or who works a career like a 9 to 5 job or being an entrepreneur, do you think that that also is a parallel to living a healthy and balanced life, focusing on load management in those other areas?
Yeah, and we've known that for a long time now. That people they talk about these folks that are multitaskers. It's a neat thought, but it doesn't work. And we talk about the folks that grind. A lot of bosses now make sure that their people do take their vacations and they come back refreshed.
Yeah.
I did a video called Stress for Success, a rant on YouTube, and it's still very relevant, where I went through a very difficult situation when I was starting my own businesses. And I was burning the candle at both ends. I started compromising sleep, stopped going to the gym, started eating fast food. And next thing you know, I just crashed and burned. And so I had to, I started experiencing some severe stress, anxiety, depression even. For a very short period of time there. So I went to the library to try to look up a book on how to manage stress. That was my solution. And I earned my undergrad degree in psychology. So I thought,
oh, wow,
this should be easy, right? I did my postgrad work in exercise science.
Nice.
But the book I picked up, I just went to Barnes & Noble. I still remember. And it was called Stress for Success by Jim Lohr. And I talked about that on my video. My video is titled Stress for Success on YouTube. And it was an entire book about paying yourself first, building those foundational health habits of getting sufficient quantity and quality of sleep, exercising regularly, eating a healthy diet. That's what and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm a pro at that. That's what I was, a competitive bodybuilder for 10 years before I started a business.
Yeah.
And I was like, seriously, that's the answer? That's why I wasn't a hot mess for the last 10 years. Now, all of a sudden, it wasn't necessarily the stress from the business. It was the fact that I had gotten weaker. The example I used was, if you can bench 300 pounds and somebody loads 200 on the bar, you're repping it out.
Yeah.
But if you can only bench 100 pounds and somebody loads 200 on the bar, you're going to get crushed.
Yeah.
And the same things occurs in business. You can never avoid stress. And probably shouldn't, because it seems as though the more stress that you expose yourself to, more employees, more customers, more business expense, the more profit that is involved in that.
Yeah.
And maybe you decide to stop someday and not grow your business anymore. And that's, totally up to you. You've taken on enough to where that's all you can handle. But what I found is that when I started sleeping better and eating better and exercising regularly, I just joined the gym, did some walks, got my sleep, just said I was going to be at bed at this hour and up at this hour. My business thrived. I was able to accomplish more. My employees were far happier, and we became very successful in a relatively short period of time subsequent to that. So I've always been a big believer in paying yourself first and making sure that you're healthy enough to where you can overcome all of these obstacles that are going to hit you every day. And there's no way to avoid it.
No. And Stan, you talk a lot about stress management. I'm curious, because I don't think I've heard you talk about this before. Have you ever experimented with meditation, mindfulness, or any of those other kind of more popular topics right now in terms of stress management and also just visualization, visualizing who you want to be, visualizing your dream? Are any of those practices something that you've done yourself and that you recommend to other people?
That's what I thought I was going to get out of that visit to the bookstore all those many years ago. I thought I was going to find some sort of hack, some sort of gimmick, I think those things might be the icing on the cake or maybe the cherry on top. But for me, I got to tell you, once I got back into the gym and exerted myself, Joe Rogan talked about this one time, and it's a generalization, but he's, people who train hard generally aren't too depressed. And I'm not suggesting it's a cure, but I'm just saying there's I've experienced from many clients over the years that consistent difficult training, whatever it is,
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting they have to do something they don't enjoy, but that physical exertion,
Yeah.
it just seems to set a reset button. And so I never really got into that. I know Dr. Andy Galpin is big on breathing, and there is some good research behind that. There's not much good research behind Wim Hof stuff,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
That hasn't been supported well. But doing the deep breathing just to kind of lower your heart rate. I did the training. I took the three
Yeah.
10-minute walks a day.
Yeah.
Frequency is more important than quantity.
Yeah.
We find that 3 10-minute walks is far better for health than one 30-minute bout of exercise at the end of the day. So, and even more recently, we're talking about people getting up once an hour and doing 10 air squats.
Yeah.
But just continuing, the 10-minute walk, a brisk 10-minute walk, it just seems to keep resetting the clock so that you can get through the day. And I found exercise to be the biggest thing for me in terms of stress management.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. There's one thing that I've really wanted to ask you, Stan, and I'll see if I can articulate it the way that I want to, but it's actually about mindset, and it's about the mindset of all the different generations that I've been able to meet in my life. So, like my father, my grandfather, my uncles, and even great grandfathers, great grandmothers. I find it very fascinating to see and to have experienced what their mindset was like. And I'm sure you can resonate with this, but the mindset is so different based on the generation. And there's a lot of people talking today about the weakening of the current mindset of those maybe in a younger generation or even like more of a middle-aged generation. And maybe it has something to do with this balance that we're talking about. But one thing that I notice is that, those men and women that are older than I am seem to have a very strong mindset that isn't as prevalent, generally speaking, in the younger generation today. Is that something that you see and something that you would comment on?
I don't know who originally made this quote, but I saw it on a podcast once. I think it might have been, I forget, I won't try and quote it, but it's the fact that our parents had hard times. My dad was born in 1930, right, and he has older brothers, so right in the middle of the Great Depression there, and they didn't have anesthesia when he went to the dentist. You start thinking about some of those things. You see these. There's some parents that grew up in the 70s. I was born in 67. I'm 57 years old. Everybody thinks that they're an OG and everybody else is a whippersnapper. I get it. That's not the point of this conversation, but they're talking about having to drink from a hose and the parents telling them to get out of the house and no cell phones and no pagers. And when the street lights came on, you came home. But anyhow, it got me to that point. It was Jocko, I think, that I originally heard say that hard times make strong men make easy times make weak men make hard times. And
yeah,
I think we've been through for the last, our baby boomers, our World War II veterans, they lived through hard times and they worked very hard and they've created a lifestyle. I grew up, my pops was a government worker, so it wasn't wealthy, but we were certainly middle class. We had a Pinto.
Nice.
And so I can't say we were rich, but we certainly didn't want for anything, and we were able to play whatever sport we wanted. And, it was now, kids have even more. My kids, that's one of the biggest concerns I have, is that my kids don't want for anything. There's nothing difficult about their lives. I can only talk to them about these things. Their mom grew up over here in Savai'i. They didn't have any running water. It was a dirt floor. They slept on reed mats. They had a 4-post hut with a grass thatch roof. She went back and visited. It's a small island, next to us here that she actually had to, when she was 6 years old, took a boat over here. But they had like a pipe with a shower that the village shared. Okay, the village shared, not her family. The entire village stood around and waited for the pipe, and then of course, there was no inside plumbing or toilets or anything. So I'm just saying that people who grew up differently without all of the the creature comforts that we've been afforded, Um, I think that's a big deal. And I think secondly, the iPhone.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
never would have made it through college with an iPhone. I don't know how kids do it. It's such a huge. Even now, I have a hard time managing it. But I'm semi-retired. I gotta monitor my kids' time on it. Such a huge distraction. I mean, it's so valuable in one sense. I can run my entire company off of an iPhone and stay in touch with anybody all over the world at any time and do all my work I need to do. But you're getting bombarded with things that are pulling you away from that work. There's 9 different message platforms that you're just like ping, Messenger and WhatsApp and your phone and the email. And I mean, it's just coming at you from so many different directions. And then these damn, what do you call them, where they figure out what it is that you enjoy and they start just
Oh, the
sending you
algorithm.
stuff. The algorithms, those things are wicked.
I know.
And if you bother to comment on anything, they just
No.
flood you with similar kind of material that you can't.
Yeah.
You're just things you're passionate about. And those are 2 of the biggest things I think is trying to manage the distractions. I always said you can be great at anything, but you can't be great at everything.
Yeah.
And at some point, you're going to have to write down the top 1 or 2 things and start to push away the distractions and focus.
Right.
And there's going to be things that are going to have to be sacrificed. They have to be in order, if you really want to be successful. Just too many irons in the fire, too many distractions. Those are difficult. And so, yeah, I think that's probably the 2 biggest things. It's a challenge for our kids, and I worry for them as a result of that.
I do too. And I have a bad feeling that we're going to look in the future, we're going to look back, and similarly to how we look back at people who smoke cigarettes all the time. Like, you've got those old videos that you can see on YouTube. Everybody's smoking, having a good time. We're like, why
in
were
maternity wards claiming it was good for the baby? Oh my God. Yeah.
I think we're going to look back on videos of now and say everybody was on their phone all the time, or at least I hope that we look back and we're not even more absorbed in all of this technology. But I guess my plea and my question to you, Stan, is what can we do? I mean, we see this problem happening. We see kind of the weakening of the attention span and the mindset. Like, what can we do now to counterbalance that?
Yeah, I say the same thing in diets. You need swaps. These ultra-processed, hyper-palatable, calorie-dense foods. I mean, the likelihood that you just willpower alone is going to get you through, not eating those things, it's nonsense. It's not going to happen. So you need swaps. And so I tell my dieters, take the ice cream out, but let's bring yogurt and berries in. Try and bring in some jerky maybe. It's something to handle that hedonic, that chewing in front of Netflix or what have you.
Yeah.
Popcorn. You're going to have a lineup to get rid of the chips, maybe the popcorn, get rid of the sugar sweetened beverages and replace them with a diet soda. However you feel about diet soda, it's a hell of a lot better than a can of sugar sweetened Coke or something. So we need swaps. We need some alternatives. And so I would say the same thing in terms of training. I would say, the best diet's the one you'll follow. The best exercise is the one you'll do. And I'm not, specific with my clients. What do you enjoy doing? I picked up a nasty little addiction called pickleball about a year ago.
Me too. Me too.
As much as I hate to admit it, oh my God.
It's fun.
And we have a team here. We have a pickleball association here with a bunch of great players of all ages and boys, girls, men, women. And we get together and it's like we're scurrying around trying to find out where we're playing that day, because there's a number of different locations we can use. We can use the elementary school. We can use the youth and kids center. We can, there's outdoor at the Lions Park over here. So we're all figuring out where to go to join up together and play. And we get pretty competitive, as pickleball gets. But but the point is that we all enjoy it and we're all in there sweating, and you can accumulate thousands of steps just playing pickleball for a couple hours that aren't deliberate, So I wish for others who are in this journey to be able to be passionate about some sort of activity that gives them the necessary exercise to help them maintain their health long term, whatever that is. Pick up basketball with your friends, as long as it's consistent and does elevate your heart rate, and then hopefully they would even if they don't like it, they would force themselves in to get a little bit of resistance, a little bit of loading, so the bones and muscles don't atrophy as the years progress. And even there, when I take a client into a gym, I find exercises that, how do you like that? I'll ask them. Not, you don't have to do anything in particular. There's many, paths to the same destination.
Right.
I try and find exercises they enjoy. And one of the hooks that I use, measurable and progressible, is if they can see progress, they're much more likely to continue to come in. And so I'll put them on a trap bar deadlift, right? The learning curve is super simple. The elevated handles, you just reach down, grab it, and pick it up.
Yeah.
They come in day one, and you have them do a few reps there and maybe a couple of sets, and they're like, great, but you write it down. You did 90 pounds, and you did 5 reps.
Yeah.
The next time they come in, I put 100 pounds on the bar, and they do 5 reps quite easily, as a matter of fact. And you and I both know that for the first, I don't know, for a newbie, probably a couple of months or longer. Gains. And then we know it's neural adaptation. We know that it's just getting more coordinated, your body recruiting, your central nervous system. It's just, most of it's neural adaptation. And the real strength gains are much further down the road and take much longer and are much, much slower, as we talked about with newbie gains. But by then they're hooked. And they're telling their husband and they're telling their friends that, when I started, I could only do the quarters, and now I'm doing the plates, or, I was only doing 5 reps and now I'm doing 8, and I just keep adding 5 pounds. It's kind of like the starting strength with those folks down here with Mark Ripito. Yeah. I'm a big believer in that. Just add 5 pounds, for beginners, it's starting strength. I'm not suggesting it's the best program for intermediate or advanced lifters, but for beginners, it's addicting.
Yeah,
it really is. When you see yourself getting stronger,
it is.
Gives you confidence, psychologically, physically, it's addicting. So that's the method I use. I find an exercise that isn't very complicated. Like maybe instead of a bench press, a seated bench press machine. Okay. So I take away all of the where to hold the bar and how to balance it. I take away all of that. It's not necessary for beginners. And I just give them something that that they can replicate every single time and measure. I got 5 reps with the pin on the 80-pound stack. And next time I put it on the 90-pound stack, I record it on the card and I show them the card. And I got a friend in Cincinnati, beat personal training, Matt Whittemer. He was an NFL football strength and conditioning coach under Buddy Morris, of all people, the one of the S&C coaches of the year for the NFL. He's been in the industry a long time, having coached Pittsburgh, and now he's in Arizona. Anyhow, Matt runs a personal training business, and he's got a chalkboard up on the wall. It's a chalkboard up on the wall. And you know how some of the powerlifting gyms, you go in and it's got the names of the guys who have the biggest bench, squat, and deadlift.
Yep.
He has the name of every single one of his clients. Every single one of them is listed on this chalkboard. And then he has this whole long line, and they're kind of broken up into men of a certain age, women of a certain age, teenagers, kind of broke them up into groups. Why? Smartly, because they'll compare themselves to each other, people of their same age and sex.
Yeah.
And he can tell me a story about every single one of them. He could do a book report on them, when they came in, what their level of condition it was, whether or not they'd been in a car accident or, and then their spouse and their kids. And he's had some of these clients for 15 plus years.
Wow.
But he has on the chalkboard PRs. And it's not just bench, squat, and deadlift. It's 5 rep trap bar PR. There's like 10 different exercises.
Yeah.
And they come into the gym. He just points them over to the board. He says, "You're doing upper today.
Yeah.
I want you to set one of those PRs." And there's like 4 chest exercises and 4 back. They just pick one.
Yeah.
And then they got to go try and beat the book, which is what, who was that always said beat the book? It'll come to me.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Sometimes I got all these names going at once.
You know a lot of people.
Your audience probably knows. They're probably typing it right now.
Yeah, typing it in. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll read. Thank you for that. But that's the goal. Make it something that is enjoyable that they'll
Yeah.
do. Backing into the question that you asked 15 minutes ago before I went off
No,
on
no,
these
no. Good.
tangents,
No, very
the answer
good.
would be find something that you enjoy doing.
No, very good. I think it mirrors also, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I think it also mirrors that dopamine response of, oh, I'm improving, I'm getting better. Like these scores are going up. Like that does something, I think, to our confidence and making us want to go back and do more, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Except with pickleball, I keep thinking I'm getting worse all the time.
Pickleball is so interesting. I grew up playing tennis and because my dad was a
Okay.
big tennis player, and
Yeah.
I found pickleball. Actually, my high school taught pickleball to us in gym class, and this was back in like 2008, before pickleball became this huge thing. And I always
Yeah.
brought it to my dad. I said, "Hey, Dad, like let's play this pickleball." And he never enjoyed it. He's like, "No, I'm like tennis. I'm a tennis man." And then
Yeah.
recently he's gotten into pickleball, and it's been such a great bonding experience for me and him to go out and play pickleball. And it's so fun because I think everybody can play it, and you can
Yep.
be as competitive as you want, and you can also be not very competitive, right? So there's a huge array.
Yeah. Matter
Yeah,
of fact, my wife plays, and there's a
yeah,
group of wives that play
yeah.
on the courts. And the other day, one of the men went over and played on their team with them on their rotation while we had two other courts going, and he was over there just smashed, and he was just beating everything. So one of the ladies came over, and she's like, "Can he play over here with you guys?"
You're like, yeah, bring it on.
And I looked over, and sure enough, he was just crushing every single shot right at him. And I was like, yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Perfect. Yeah. I wanted to run by something really quick and get your feedback on it. And it's a health and wellness exercise program. It's a holistic health program that a lot of the viewers and a lot of my clients, I give to a lot of them. And I wanted to just run the exercise portion of that program by you really quickly. And I think it's something
Yeah.
that a lot of people could resonate with. So a lot of people that come to the Zen With Zach community and just in general to receive teaching and coaching and mentoring, the physical health aspect is a big pillar of what I do. And a lot of the people are not trying to compete, right? They're not trying to become like the biggest and best bodybuilder in the world, right? But they want to improve strength and body composition. And so I also have some questionnaires and some lifestyle, questionnaires and questions that I ask them. But typically what we see and what I have them doing are, anywhere between 2 to 4 heavy weightlifting sessions per week. And those sessions are 45 minutes to 1 hour with a warm up and a cool down in between. And those exercises in that 45-minute window to an hour are usually like a leg day, a push day, and a pull day. And the leg day being, barbell squats. So the compound lifts are really the main things that I'm focusing on with these individuals. And so it's 2 to 4 times per week, compound lifting. They're doing 10 to 15,000 steps per day. So they're doing multiple walks during the day. They're getting sun exposure, not too much, but also not too little. They are doing stretching and yoga 2 to 3 times per week, maybe more around the 2 times per week area, because I like what you say, that what you do to yourself is much more valuable than, somebody else doing something to you, right? So in terms of like stretching versus getting massage, not that that's a bad thing, but there's some stretching involved with it. And then also, working on their dream and purpose in life as a big pillar, and improving their relationships with family and friends. How would you rate, kind of that program? Is there anything you would add or edit to somebody that is looking to increase strength and body composition?
Yeah, I'll tell you right off the bat, I wouldn't add. These are not competitive athletes. These are people whose priority is probably faith, family, and career.
Yeah.
And so the training portion will always take a back seat. I wouldn't want them ever to think that if they did less, that it wouldn't be beneficial.
Yeah.
Sometimes people think that they let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
And it's really just more important that you show up consistently. What we know about the latest research is that you do get a detraining effect. If you don't go in and train for 2 weeks, you get a detraining effect. It has a lot less to do with volume and more to do with frequency. So Uh, they don't have to go in and train for an hour. They might be able to go in and train for 20 minutes and be able to maintain or gain if their time commitment changes. If they get really busy, don't think that you have to not train. Just train less.
Yeah.
Because showing up and doing something is far better than waiting until you have time to do, the hour-long workout.
Absolutely.
So that's a big thing.
No, that's very important. Yeah.
Yep. We found that we're seeing now in most of the research. I know there's a lot of volume studies. Unfortunately, I think those are highly confounded by edema, by swelling, and I think that they're also in newbies. I think for more experienced lifters, and I'm not talking about just intermediate even lifters, you can do a lot less volume and still make. And I think it's even superior because you have less fatigue. One of the things I found is I tried to do too much too late into my life. I was just tired all the time. I had brain fog. My body was just beat up, and I kept going in and punishing myself, thinking I had to do all these sets. Yeah. Dorian Yates, 7-time, 8-time, what was he? Mr. Olympia, at least 7 times. Mr. Olympia, Dorian Yates, trained 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for about an hour. He only did, he did, I think, 2 exercises per body part, 2 top sets of each. So I think he did 4 sets for chest, 4 sets for legs. I think that's, from his blood and guts, from what I can recall. He made some changes over the years. The effort matters more than the volume. Yeah. Volume is crossing T's and dotting I's. I did 4 sets of that. I did 4 sets of that. That doesn't matter to me. If you want to recruit enough muscle fibers such that you're creating a sufficient stimulus, you have to get to within a couple reps of failure or lift a heavy enough load. Yeah. Like 85% of your 1 rep max for 5 reps. The first rep is going to recruit all 100% of that muscle fiber. Yeah. And you're going to do 5 reps. You don't have to go to failure. You can leave a rep or 2 in the tank. Hypertrophy, you leave 1 rep. Strength, you could leave 2 or 3 reps in the tank, depending on what your priority is. Yeah. And so I think from everything that I'm saying is you want to minimize fatigue. The way you do that is not to keep repeating those hard sets over and over and over again, because a lot of it is what I couldn't figure out about the brain fog is that like we discussed earlier, is that a lot of what helped you produce that force is psychological. And
CNS. Yeah. And
when you go to failure, a lot of what happens is psychological. Yep. There's some physiological adaptations that occur as well. Sure. That obviously can impede your recovery and performance. Calcium ion accumulation, a whole host of things that are physiologists beyond this conversation. But take a little longer rest periods. Yeah. That's you don't need to do slow negatives. It just creates too much fatigue. Yeah. You don't need to do more than, I'm going to say, for these folks, 2 exercises, 2 sets of each. If you're going to do chest, you can do a flatten and incline. If you're going to do legs, you can do a leg extension and a leg press. 2 sets. Yeah. The weight should probably be heavier because the lighter loads for the higher repetition ranges, the 15, 20, 25 reps, accumulate more fatigue. Yep. And it's harder psychologically to get yourself in the place where you're recruiting the maximum muscle fiber recruitment. Okay. Psychology kind of goes out the window when you load up to 85% of your 1 rep max. Yeah. Because you're going to, all the muscle fibers are going to recruit it. And I know people are hesitant to do that. They think the heavier loads are going to injure them. A 5 or 6 rep load, if you warm up, you put 30 pounds on the stack for the leg extension, you do a couple of reps. Then you put 80 pounds, you do 1 rep. Then you put 120 pounds, you do 1 rep. Then you put 150, you do 1 rep. Now your top set's going to be 180 or 200 for 5. Yeah. But your warm up, did you notice my warm up wasn't 10 reps at 30, 10 reps at 80, 10 reps at 120? It's junk volume. And by then you've exhausted yourself, not just physically, but mentally. You've exhausted yourself. Yeah. I'm only interested in those top 2 sets. If you go over to the incline dumbbell press, don't grab the 50s for 10 and then the 60s for 10 and the 70s for 10. Grab the 50s for 2.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Grab the 60s for one, grab the
Yep.
70s for one, rest for at least 2 minutes and
Yep.
be completely, recovered. Grab the 90s, do
Yeah.
your set of 6, rest for a full 3 minutes, maybe do one more set of 5. You're done with incline dumbbell press.
Yeah.
This is coming from a guy who did 16 sets per body part and did a push pull legs, took
Oh
Sunday
my
off.
gosh, that's
Trained
wild.
twice a day, AM, PM. I was in there doing
Wow,
16 sets for chest, and at night it was 16 sets for shoulders and triceps.
that's
The
wild.
next morning it was 16 sets for quads. That night it was 16 sets for hamstrings.
Yeah.
Totally unnecessary, absolutely impossible to recover from.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting at most, if their intensity and effort is substantial enough, if they've learned and progressed to the point where they can really give it enough effort, that they pick 2 exercises and do 2 top sets of each. They could even do 1 exercise with 2 top sets and still progress. Here's how you measure that. If they're not progressing, they're not growing. You have to get stronger in order to add muscle.
Yep.
You can get stronger without getting bigger.
Yeah.
That's a central nervous system stimulus. But you can't get bigger.
Yeah.
You can't add muscle, hypertrophy, unless you get stronger. So that's why we beat the book. That's why if you don't add 1 rep or 5 pounds, not every workout, maybe not even every week. Sometimes it might take 2 or 3 weeks. But if under the same circumstances, not changing your range of motion or significantly changing your technique or whatever, if under the same circuit, which is why we don't hop around to different exercises, we do the same exercise repeatedly week after week after week, and we should be able to get 1 more rep or 5 more pounds. That's how you measure strength or hypertrophy. You can't accomplish either without that measurement.
Yeah.
And I'm just a big believer that less is more, and that that you should probably do either a full body workout twice a week or an upper lower twice a week. I think once you get into push pull legs and start to get into the gym 5-6 days, now I think you're going to start to accumulate a lot of fatigue that's going to be hard to recover from, especially for this audience who's got those other priorities.
Right. Definitely.
And I don't think the workouts need to last more than 40 minutes. I really don't.
Oh, okay. All right.
Actually lifting weights is a very small portion of that. They've got to warm up, and you might have to do a stretch for a cool down. I will say this about stretching in terms of this, again, time. Let me say 2 things about how much time you have.
Okay.
If you do what we call synergistic or opposing muscle groups, a back exercise and a chest exercise. You can do a back exercise, rest a minute, do a chest exercise, rest a minute, do a back exercise, rest a minute, do a chest exercise. You're going to condense the amount of times it takes you to finish chest and back, but you'll get an equivalent workout as if you did chest, rested for 2, chest, rested for 2, chest, right? You get an equivalent workout if you superset opposing muscle groups with a slightly smaller rest period. You still need a sufficient rest period, because a lot of those substrates that have to either dissipate, like I said, calcium channel or hydrogen ion buildup or creatine phosphate accumulation, those kinds of things need to regenerate. So that's one thing. And another thing is, if you lift through a full range of motion, and there's plenty of research to support this, you will get equivalent flexibility benefits as if you had done a static stretching session. I think mobility is important. You should move quite a bit. Static stretching, the lengthen and hold for 30 seconds to a minute, which is what's required to get to increase flexibility, does not prevent injury. It does not improve recovery from your training session. Doesn't decrease DOMS. It doesn't increase the results of the training. It may hinder performance if you stretch too hard before training, so I'd only stretch after. We all know that. If you enjoy it, do it. But if you train through a full range of motion, it's duplicative, not additive. And so you could cut down on the amount depending on if they like it or not. I'm not one to interfere with what somebody enjoys. The yoga is very different. Yoga has some, other benefits, unless they enjoy stretching to the same degree as yoga. I'm just suggesting that if time is of the essence, and you get both the range of motion benefits and the strength and hypertrophy benefits from the weight training, then you might not need to duplicate that effort. That's for only that cause.
Very, very helpful. Yeah. Well, Stan,
I hope I answered all those questions.
No, you did. I've got one last one if you have just a few minutes. One last question. All right, perfect. So this is about, looking back over your life. As you look back over your life and maybe look at your 32-year-old self right now, what advice would you give your 32-year-old self now looking back?
Yeah, boy, if I knew then what I know now. I say that a lot about my lifting career. I used to do dirty bulks and get fat. I used to be over-restrictive in my diets and do too much cardio and lose muscle and get skinny and try and lose too much weight too quick. I've been there. I've done all of that. I used to train too hard. And that would probably be one of the big things I would tell my 32-year-old self is that I should have, I just didn't have the knowledge, to be honest. We have it now. And so that's important. And then the discussion that we just had, I trained too hard, but I also businessed too hard. Burning the candle at both ends, all that other thing, and the stress that accumulated. We covered all that already. I just think you're far better off being consistent. Remember, compliance is the science. Being consistent and setting up a workload that's manageable. I did an obesity rant on about Samoa and about my wife's circumstance growing up when they used to grow all their own food and sell it at the marketplace. They had no obesity in their family. Then when they moved over here, they had food stamps. And so nobody grows their own food. They just buy the white flour and seed oils and sugar at the store and eat the fast food, unfortunately. And they suffered from obesity as a result. And I just think that I think it's important to remember that it's the consistency with the small things that matter.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, Stan, I really appreciate you taking the time. It was great to catch up with you and hear from your wisdom. I want to just quickly acknowledge you that I think you're one of the greatest philosopher athletes in the world. And I think that's one thing about you that makes you so unique is that you got a lot of people that are strong, but someone who has such a beautiful and bright intellect mixed with experience of life and with the fitness, it's really hard to find. So I want to acknowledge you for that.
Thank you, brother. I lived it, man. I'm talking about stuff I've done wrong myself multiple times. And so I'm sharing from my glass house. I'm just sharing. I'm not judging anyone here, and I'm not throwing stones. So thank you very much.
All right. Have a great day, Stan, and thanks for your time.
Take care. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in to the Zen with Zach video podcast today. Stan Efferding is an incredible man, a great friend and mentor of mine, and we learned a lot about not only physical health, but mental health, mental stability, also strengthening the mind. I think these are really important subjects that aren't talked about enough in the world. And if you want to learn more about the Zen with Zach community, you can give me a follow on Instagram. I teach on the Zoom platform at least every other week. I also take individuals through an 8-week transformational breakthrough program that helps people in critical moments of transition. So if you want to hear more about that, give me a follow on Instagram at Zen with Zach, Facebook, Zen with Zach, and YouTube at Zen with Zach.